Members of the class of 2017, good afternoon. Good afternoon, too. Dear parents, and relatives, and friends, welcome to this 54th Baccalaureate service at Eckerd College. I'm going to address those of you who graduate tomorrow more personally than I usually do at this service as I contemplate the world you now enter exactly 50 years after my own graduation from college. I ask your indulgence not for a sermon on what you should do going forward, but for a reflection on the similarities between the world into which you graduate and the world I graduated into a half-century ago. When I graduated from college, the country was aflame with discord, discontent, and distrust. The murder of civil rights workers my age in Mississippi, the violence against freedom marches in Alabama, the bombings of African American churches, the fire hoses, the dogs, the brutality of Southern state police, the forced integration of schools, the stark contrast between the glorious rhetoric of Martin Luther King Jr. and the desperate poverty and inequality of so many African Americans was a staple of the evening news and student discourse every single day. In my freshman year, Martin Luther King delivered the greatest speech in American history in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. And suddenly we all had a dream as large and grand as the nation itself. 3 months later, President John Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, and we knew our lives and our country would never be the same. Within a year of my graduation, King himself would be assassinated, as would President Kennedy's brother Bobby. And the struggle for civil rights would be overlaid with the military and cultural horrors of the Vietnam War. I was just your age when 500,000 American soldiers in Southeast Asia were fighting for a war in which we lost 58,220 men and women, mostly men my age, 6 of whom graduated high school with me in my class of 52 students. This was a war in which America dropped more bombs on Laos, a neighboring country that was our ally, more bombs than we dropped on Europe and Japan together in World War II. This is a war for all the blood and armaments and effort we expended that we lost. Between the conflicts of the fight for civil rights and the dubious war to control the politics of a country on the other side of the world, many in my generation lost their faith in the institutions of our country, some of them for as long as they lived. It was, I can assure you, a challenging, confusing time to be a brand new college graduate. And yet several things. People are often smarter, wiser, more human and more humane than institutions. Vietnam is now our ally. Many Vietnamese are now our fellow citizens, our friends, our spouses, and our children. Vietnam is now part of America. And the Vietnamese in Vietnam are extremely friendly to Americans. English, not Chinese, is the second language in their schools. They say they only fought us for 20 years. They've been fighting the Chinese for 1,000. Their ambition is to have the freedoms we tried to force on them 50 years ago. African Americans, too, are in a wholly different place than they were. We still have far to go. But much of the overt racism and segregation of 50 years ago is gone. The challenges, so many of them rooted in poverty, are usually more subtle now and complex, but undeniable. These conflicts, the defining issues of my generation, are yours too. The issues of civil rights and equality for African Americans are obvious enough. But the cultural conflict with the Asia of my youth, which is largely settled now for most Americans, has shifted to the Middle East. Much of our country is terrified of the threat, of the motives, and the values, and even the appearance of Muslims, just as we were of Asians 50 years ago. We've been fighting these real and imagined enemies in Afghanistan and other places since before you were in preschool. The war in Afghanistan is now America's longest war, one in which we have spent between $2 and $3 trillion, where 2,400 of our soldiers have died and 20,000 more have been wounded. Unlike the war in Vietnam, though, the war in Afghanistan has become politically invisible. As one commentator says, when it comes to wars, we Americans have a selective memory. The Afghan war, dating from October 2001, has earned the distinction of having been forgotten while it's still underway. I believe both the duration and the invisibility of the Afghan war are because our soldiers are no longer drafted from the population around your age, as they were when I was in your place. America's always had a schizophrenic sense of its culture. We've always celebrated our openness to people of all religions and colors and creeds. At the same time, we were skeptical, if not a bit disgusted by the immigration of Catholics, the Irish, the Italians, the Jews, the Poles, and so on. With each new wave of immigrants, we've declared that American values may be going down the tubes, conveniently ignoring when necessary that the fundamental American value is that all men are created equal. You who graduate tomorrow undoubtedly have a better education than I had, and a better understanding of the clash of values now being played out on the world stage. Those of us fortunate enough to be part of your apprenticeship here for the past 4 years look forward to your taking up the great challenges of your time. Although our country is clearly divided and fractious, no country on earth offers more opportunity to improve the lot of humankind than America does, as it has since its birth. As the founders of America knew, as all witnesses to villainy know, as the great Nuremberg prosecutor Benjamin Ferencz said in an interview just the other day, it takes courage not to be discouraged. It's easy to tweet, text, Instagram, or Facebook one's outrage, but it takes courage not to be discouraged and to work unrelentingly for justice. Grant us courage for the facing of the hour. We sing and pray in the lifelong struggle to build a better world. The great totemic work of art for my generation was the film the deer hunter. It was our Guernica, our War and Peace. At the very end of the movie, gathered together in a Milltown bar after the funeral of one of their classmates, the battered band of small-town survivors of the Vietnam War talk quietly, grieve, and then, surprising themselves, sing, both as a lament and a prayer, "God bless America." I don't know another cinematic moment as powerful. I don't know another prayer as important or as timely, then and now. Let us remember, when we sing this same hymn together in a few minutes, that God Bless America is both an anthem and a prayer. Sing it then with all your heart. Thank you.